Amen, amen. Get your Bibles out. We're in the book of John again this week. We'll be in John next week for the resurrection of Lazarus for Easter. And I'm excited about that. We're on the sixth sign of the seven. The resurrection of Lazarus will be number 7, leading up to Jesus' own resurrection. We're on sign number 6 this week, and it's the most fully developed and one of the longest stories in the Gospel of John. It's known as the healing of the man born blind. And by the time we get to this miracle, we're supposed to be thinking about some things in John's Gospel. We're supposed to have learned so far that saving light has come into the world. And that saving light has come into the world, shining against the darkness of sin and unbelief. Jesus has come to save. Amen? As we go along in John's storytelling, we learn that there's a natural consequence to the saving light. That if the light shines and that if Jesus has come to save, it puts us on the precipice of decision making. If we receive the light, there's salvation. But if we're resistant, if we reject the light, there is the consequence of rejecting His word, His life, His truth. We are judged with darkness. Light has a divisive characteristic to it. My father-in-law was visiting and helping me with a project that required some welding. He's an expert welder because he worked in the steel industry his whole life. All of Amber's cousins and most of the men in her family are all in the steel industry outside of St. Louis, Missouri. He put on his mask and his welding gloves, and I know nothing about welding, nothing at all. So I stepped up to watch him work and to learn and to see what he was doing and to see how the project was going, to assist him if he needed any help. Welding is a pretty incredible skill to have. It has the hottest of white and blue light flame coming out of that blowtorch. A flame so hot, so white, so powerful that it can fuse together, cut, repair even the hardest of metals. My father-in-law began working and he sensed my presence. And at the moment he sensed my presence, he threw off that mask so fast and he looked at me frustrated with a warning. And he said, hey, don't get too close. Don't look at the light. You'll get flash. I went, well, okay, all right, just trying to help. I backed up. His mask flipped back down. He went back to work. I thought, well, I guess I'm not needed around here. I watched for a little bit. I wandered back through the kitchen where Amber and her mother were because they know about these things and I don't. And I said, what is flash? And Amber said, you didn't look at the light, did you? I said, well, I did for a little bit. And she said, flash is terrible. It is like a burn of light on your eyes, and it hurts terribly. And I thought to myself, I began rubbing my eyes. I thought, oh no, what's going on? And I said, well, can it? She said, yes, it can cause blindness even if you stare at it too long, Chad. That's why they've got these big helmets and these really dark lenses on. I worried the whole rest of the day. I came in every couple of minutes. If I had flash, would I have it by now? I think my eyes are hurting a little. Wait, that's a bug. No, it's just a bug. Okay. And all day I worried. Fortunately, I didn't get flash. Here's the point. The same light that can be so purposeful and so powerful without proper respect, without a proper response, will also bring blindness. Light is a divisive force. It both reveals salvation and exposes our arrogance and our ignorance unto darkness. As John tells the story of salvation, he weaves into his stories, and we haven't had time to spend a lot of time on this issue, but he weaves into these stories the sacred feasts of the Jewish people. You say, well, Pastor, this sounds like you're bunny trailing. Not for this story in John chapter 9. John wants us to anchor this story in a feast. And so he tells us leading up to this next sign. He says in John chapter 7 and verse 14, he says, not until halfway through the festival. And the festival here is the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths. Not until halfway did Jesus go up into the temple courts, which was the central focus of this festival, and begin to teach. The Feast of Tabernacles is probably the most favorite of the Jewish people at this time. It's in the top 2 at least. It's the most joyful of all of the feasts. For 7 days it celebrated God's guidance and saving work of Israel in the Old Testament when they were in the wilderness, and they had to sleep in booths or man-made tents or tabernacles, and they were in the wilderness, and it celebrates, for example, how God provided water for them. So for every day, for 7 days, the Jewish priest would go down to the pool of Siloam, and they would draw water from the pool, and they would bring it back to the temple and pour it out symbolically as an offering of God's of gratefulness for God's provision for his people and for him saving them. There was another part of this feast. At night, the priests would light 4 huge torches. 4 huge torches in the outer courts. They were 75 feet high, ancient sources say. And they would light those torches in the outer courts, and the people would gather around for singing songs of praise and for dancing and for celebrating together the Lord's presence with them in the wilderness. How was God with them in the wilderness? By day, he was a pillar of cloud. By night, a pillar of fire or a pillar of light, guiding them, saving them, protecting them from their enemies. So to commemorate this event, this saving event in their life, they would light up those torches every night for a grand celebration. Jesus is there teaching. And in John 8 and verse 12, it says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Immediately, when he says that he's the light, the Jewish people know the implications, especially the religious leaders. They know he is claiming to be and to do what God was and did for Israel, to be their light. And so by the end of this chapter, in fact, right away in verse 13, as soon as these words come out of Jesus' mouth, it says the Pharisees or the religious leaders, they challenged him. And the chapter will go on, they challenge him about his testimony. What kind of witness or testimony do you have? They will challenge him. And by the end of the chapter, in verse 59, it says they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. It's coming out of that week of teaching and the rejection of Jesus by these Jewish leaders and authorities that Jesus puts an object lesson in motion. The 6th sign. It's a lesson on the nature and process of shining light which saves. And it's also a lesson warning each and every disciple on the dangers of self-righteousness and self-confidence. In John 9, we learn that spiritual sight depends on our response to Christ. Spiritual sight, truly seeing spiritually, depends on the revelation of Jesus and how we respond to God's saving revelation in Him. Number one, we learn Jesus is the light. And you say, okay, Pastor, you already said that. But there's a twist on it. Jesus is the light sent for our salvation. Sent for our salvation. John chapter 9 and verse 1 says this. As he, Jesus, went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. This is an interesting way to begin this miraculous work of Jesus. But we begin here because the disciples are making an error in their judgment. They assume that a particular sin was the cause of this man's blindness, but Jesus rejects their simplistic notions and their man-made reasoning for his blindness. He rejects it. Now, I would like here if Jesus paused and gave us a long lesson about what we call the problem of evil, but he doesn't. Because Jesus has bigger things in mind for this moment. He has a bigger object lesson he wants to give his disciples. Jesus rejects the simplistic notion that all individual suffering is related to an individual sin. We're reminded that sometimes the suffering we face is not related to a particular sinful act, but to the general fallenness and brokenness and darkness of humanity. The disciples were thinking, and that was good. But their thinking was misguided. Misguided. Instead, Jesus quickly shifts the discussion to the works of God. The works of light and life and salvation and living water for his people. And he shifts the discussion specifically to his role in doing the works of God and his invitation to the disciples to join him in doing the works of God while they have the light, while they have their opportunity, their life, their daytime. You parents have probably had similar discussions with your kids. I know I have. There have been times when I give one of my children a chore pretty early in the day because it's a little bit of a test to see if they're going to do it on their own accord and by at a good time and in a good way. And you may give them a chore. Hey, we got to pick up sticks and rake leaves today, or mow grass, or we've got to get out and I want you to sweep the garage, whatever it might be. Sure enough, as the day rolls on, I'm hinting all day long. Hey, what you doing, son? I know. I got a chore to do. But right now, my friends are online, and they're all online gaming. I'm just jumping online for a little bit to play games with my friends. Okay, all right. A little bit later, living the good life, plate of food. Hey, son, how's it going today? What else you got planned for today, son? What do you got planned for today? Right? The chore has been given early in the morning. Well, Dad, I know I got to go out, and I know you want me to mow the grass, but I really got to eat first, or I'll be famished out there, Dad, right? So, boy, they take so much time making the food, eating. It's like you're watching them. Every bite is just stretching it out. Finally, it's getting down to the wire, And I walk, I open the blinds, I look out, and boy, that grass is really growing out there fast today. Right? You kind of look and you glance over, and that boy will be saying, Dad, I got homework to do. I just remembered. Let me do this homework first. And by the end of the day, when you see the sun is starting to set, and you know the chores aren't done, there's a serious conversation getting ready to happen. And you look at that setting sun and you say out loud, what a beautiful day it's been. What a nice night for a chore, for some work. And you're just hoping they get it in with the time that they've been given to do the work. Jesus, he tells them that he's been sent into the world to do the works of God. And what are they doing? They're misguiding their energies to the wrong things about the nature of this blind man's sin. And they're spinning their wheels in the wrong direction. And Jesus says, I've been sent to give compassion and grace and saving work into this world. Let's get on to the chore and come with me because I'm sending you as well. Verse 5, Jesus tells them. Now, he's already said this in chapter 8. He's not sure if his disciples are getting the message. He tells them, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And after saying this, he spit on the ground, and he made some mud with the saliva, and he put it in the man's eyes. Go, he told the man, wash in the pool of Siloam. And John is careful to tell us the word Siloam means sent. So this man went and he washed and he came home seeing. Jesus tells the disciples, I'm in the world. I've been sent here as light to bring that light into the dark situations around us. Jesus says he comes in the role of a servant with compassion for the lost and the blind and those in darkness. And at the work of his hands, the creative work where he picks up the dust of the earth and he spits into it and he puts it on the man's eyes and he does a miraculous creative work. And what does he do? He sends the man on a journey. The man can't see and he's walking around with mud on his eyes. Well, okay, I guess I'll go and wash. The man has no understanding, maybe, of whether or not this will come to pass. Notice that Jesus talks about being in the world. Why? Because the Father has sent him. Jesus is light sent to the world. I'll say it again. Why? Because John is beginning in his gospel a rich play on words that will carry into future chapters. He wants his readers to know Siloam means sent. Why? Because Jesus, we'll learn, is the sent one. And as the blind man obeys, physically washing in the waters of the pool called sent, he is healed by the power of the sent one. He's restored by the one who says, I am the living waters. It's this very pool they would draw water from. And he's given sight by the one who says, I am the light of the world. What a lesson for his disciples to do the works of God while they have their moment, their daylight. What a lesson for our discipleship. This blind man all of a sudden begins to become a model for what it's like following Jesus as he's going to grow and grow in his faith. And this object lesson is set up for them. Verse 8. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen the blind man begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? So evidently the man goes to the pool of Siloam. He's healed. He goes home where his family and neighbors are. Some claim that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am him. I'm the guy. Verse 10. Well, how then were your eyes opened? They asked. He replied, The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and then I could see. Notice, all he knows about Jesus is his teaching and his name. And they asked him, where is he? Where is this man? And he said, I don't know. I don't know. And so John sets us up for the largest part of the story. Keep in mind, this man hasn't physically seen Jesus yet because he has to make this journey with the mud of creation on his eyes in trusting obedience before his blindness is healed. And with the neighbors, they have this huge surprise at the story. They're shocked at the healing because no one has ever heard of a man being born a certain way and having recreated life in them. And so in their curiosity, they want to make sure this man goes before the priests with his healing. And this little scene sets the stage for the divisiveness of light, number 2. Rejecting the light plunges us further into darkness. This will be the longest point because it's the longest part of the story. Don't worry, we'll wrap it up quick in 3 and 4. John 9 and verse 13. They brought to the Pharisees, this is the neighbors, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. If you're new to the scriptures, you need to understand a little bit about the nature of the problem. In the eyes of the religious leaders, Jesus had disobeyed God by breaking the Sabbath. He broke the Sabbath in at least 2 ways. He did the work of healing. And you weren't supposed to do the work of healing even on the Sabbath unless somebody's life was at stake. And obviously this man had been born blind. He had suffered a long time, but he could wait a day or 2 more to be healed. Secondly, he made mud, and you're not supposed to make mud because making mud is work for brickmakers and all these other kinds of people. He made mud, so he worked on the Sabbath. In their eyes, Jesus is a sinner, and you'll see that in a minute. And the man stands before them under investigation because he's the primary witness to these law-breaking activities. But there's a problem. What do they do with the power of the miracle? Nobody could fathom the healing of a man born this way. What do they do with that and the Sabbath breaking? And this creates a divisiveness, doesn't it? Because light divides. And it creates a conflict. Even some of the Pharisees can't get along over it. Verse 16. Some of the Pharisees said, this man... And you're going to see they never use the phrase or the name Jesus here or prophet. They'll just say this man and that man. It's real derogatory. This man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. He's a sinner. But others asked, how can a sinner perform such miraculous signs? So they were divided. Why? Because that's what light does. They were divided, verse 17, and then they turned again to the blind man. Well, what do you have to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. And the man replied. Now, notice we've gone from Jesus, I don't really know who he is. Now the man's beginning to make some conclusions for himself. And the man says, well, he's a prophet. The religious leaders are arguing about who Jesus is. Most of them are rejecting his work as a sinner. The blind man is now growing in his testimony and his commitment. But because the religious leaders are intent on rejecting Jesus, they still need to figure out the miracle. They still need to figure out how that could happen if Jesus is a sinner. Note how their wills are set against him. A second investigation begins. There's 3 parts to this trial. The blind man, then his parents, then the blind man again. Look at verse 18. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, they still did not believe. They did not believe that he had been born blind. There's got to be another explanation for this miracle. Maybe he wasn't really born that way, and this is just an ordinary, recovery. And that'll really show him. They did not believe that he had been born blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Is this your son, they asked? Is this the one that you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see? Verse 20. Well, he's our son, all right. We know he's our son, the parents answered. And yep, we know he was born blind. They're hesitating. But how he can see or who opened his eyes, don't get us mixed up in that. We don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He's legal. He'll speak for himself. And they begin to distance themselves from the controversy. Verse 22, his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had already decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said, he's of age, ask him. With the second interview, we begin sensing an increasing disbelief in the Jewish leaders who are so resistant to the evidence of the miracle that they're sure it's a mistake. The parents confirm, it's no mistake, our son was born blind. And we begin sensing the spiritual significance of what John is saying. The miracle and its significance should be increasing for us as well. Why? Because it's no mistake. We were born in spiritual blindness and darkness also. Really, it's us. And we sense the increasing stakes about each decision for Christ. Oh, the parents are going to respond by distancing themselves from the miracle because they feared the social and the cultural consequences for professing that Jesus is the Messiah. The power brokers of Judaism, they're going to expel anyone who acknowledges Jesus, and yet here they are, stuck. The parents are cautious and hesitant. The stakes are high, so these guys think perhaps the man will deny and recant his original testimony. How will he respond? Verse 24. A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. Now, this is a weird phrase, but it's kind of like when you were little and somebody challenged you to be truthful and they said, do you swear to God? Right? Like in my household, you did not ever swear to God. It was you just did not do that. And I still don't to this day, right? But another kid in the neighborhood might be, would you swear to God? Would you put your hand on the Bible? And you would say, no, I won't do that. Well, what about cross your heart and hope to die, stick a needle in your eye? Yeah, I'll do that one instead, right? I promise, right? This is kind of their way of that challenge, right? They're not telling them to stop and have a worship service. They're saying, you better be truthful before God, buddy, right? He replied, verse 25, whether the man is a sinner or not. Notice this peripheral issue keeps coming up. Now we know that Jesus has no sin within him. This man is not yet full of the knowledge of Jesus. He's got impartial, he's not quite there on the journey yet, right? But he doesn't get his eyes off on the peripheral issues of where the sin comes from. He keeps his eyes on Jesus. And he says, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I know is that I was blind, but now I see. This man's boldness is increasing. And their judgments are sorely misplaced. They have mankind's judgments, the world's rationale, and a divine miracle has taken place in their midst, and it's undeniable. And so here the challenge begins to shift, and as the man gets more and more bold, he begins to challenge them in return. Verse 26. Then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered, I have told you already. You did not listen. You want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? And then they hurled insults at him. You are this fellow's disciples. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't know where he comes from. What has Jesus been preaching? I am the light of the world. I'm the God who guided Moses through the wilderness. And they're too blind to see it. Verse 31. Verse 30. The man answered, now that is remarkable. That's amazing. You don't know where he comes from, and you're worried about where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. Now again, I got to translate this for you, because the man does not mean, obviously when sinners pray to God, and they're open-hearted towards him, he hears their prayers, right? He listens to a sinner who wants to convert and become a follower of Jesus Christ. That's not what the man means. What the man means is about prophets. And he says, we know that God doesn't listen to false prophets and do miracles through them. He only listens and does the miracles for the prophets who are in right standing with him. This is what he has in his mind because he's already identified Jesus as a prophet. He says, we know that God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Verse 32. No one has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. They continue their attack against Jesus, but the tables have turned. And the only thing, and you need to highlight this, where he says, now this is amazing or remarkable, because the only thing that should amaze us more than the saving work this man experienced, the only thing that is more remarkable is the resistance in the human heart to the light. This story is teaching us about the nature of unbelief, and it is cautioning each one, yes, disciples as well, to boldly search our heart for false allegiances and false focuses and the falseness of our human nature and our denial, to recognize that we too have spiritual blindness in us. I've experienced my own denial, especially after turning 45. I was at the DMV a few years back, and I was renewing my license. And they asked me, and they said, put your face up to the machine and press your forehead there and read the lines we tell you to read. Okay, I said, sure, no problem. I've got excellent vision, I thought to myself. 2020, my whole life. Let's get this done. I put my forehead down to the machine, and I began to read. And you know what you see when you look into those things. And I saw something like this, and I began to read. She said, read line 2. And I said, OKZHSN. And I looked up with a smile, ready to get the stamp and get my license. She said, sir, could you please read all 3 columns on line 2? Please read again. And literally my eyes looked something like this, because there's a 3rd column over here, and I didn't see any letters in that column. She said, please read all 3 columns. There's 9 letters, sir. And I put my head down in there. I said, nope, there's no letters there. This machine is broken, I think. I literally had no idea what was going on. I seriously thought the machine was broken. The woman was very patient with me. And she said, okay, sir, why don't you step over to my colleague's machine and let's read their letters. If that machine is broken, step over here. I went over to the next machine over, and I stuck my head down in that thing, and I started to read so proudly, and I put my head, hey, this one's broken too. You guys have got a system failure here. She said, no, sir, you can't see the 3rd column. I said, well, that can't be possible. I've had 20/20 vision my whole life. Let me try one more time. She said, go ahead, sir. I shoved my head back in that machine, and I was angling. I was just rolling those eyes. If I could just catch a glimpse, I could read those letters and be out of there and get nothing. I got nothing, no matter how hard I tried. She smiled. I said, this is unbelievable. I can't get my license today. Do you have glasses, sir? No, like I said, I've never had glasses before. I don't need glasses. Sir, you need glasses. Here's your paper. Have your optometrist fill this out. And when you bring this back to us, bring your new glasses with us, sir, and you'll be able to read the machine. May the Lord help us not to fall into the same patterns, yes, disciples included, the same patterns of disbelief that are deep within us. Aren't you grateful that we don't have to stay blind, that there is a journey to vision, there is a journey to seeing clearly, there's a journey to receiving the treatment that our hearts need, that we can admit our darkness, we can admit our blindness, and that when we admit it, we're not rejected and left on our own, but He gives us a way forward. The optometrist, he lives, and he opens blind eyes today. Number 3. Receiving the light moves us closer to Christ. Each of these points will get shorter and shorter. Remember, what's so incredible is the man hasn't physically seen Jesus yet, and yet he believes in Him. His testimony is unwavering, because though he hasn't physically seen Jesus, he's been changed miraculously and powerfully. And he's completely willing to face the consequences of that testimony, because he cannot deny that he has received his sight. And so he experiences the persecution and the rejection of being thrown out of the synagogue for his belief. And yet, as he is being thrown out of that place, in him is emerging a journey of faith that is triumphant. And he becomes an example for all of us who have received the touch of Jesus. And we know that we know that we know, I once was blind, but now I see. Jesus doesn't leave him on his own. Just as a few chapters earlier, Jesus went to the crippled man, and he found him again later. And he approached the crippled man about some things in his life. And we learn in that place that the story ends on a negative note. The crippled man doesn't profess his faith when he's on trial. He doesn't openly share and witness to the saving power of Jesus. He holds back. Here is the opposite scenario. Same thing though. Jesus will track this blind man down and check on him to make sure he has the fullness of his revelation. Jesus wants him to know that he's more than a miracle worker, that he's more than a quick fix, that he's more than a prophet even, that he is the one all are waiting on. Verse 35. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found the blind man, Jesus said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Here, Jesus gives himself the loftiest title from the Old Testament vision of Daniel, who sees one as a Son of Man at the right hand of the Father in the throne room of heaven. And this one is given authority to judge the world. Authority to judge the world. He's the Messiah. Do you believe in the Son of Man, the Messiah who's coming? Verse 36, who is he, sir? The man asked. If you'll just show him to me, I'll believe in him. Tell me that I can believe in him. I'm ready to believe. And Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. We have very few statements that are so near to the fulfillment. Jesus is very careful about what he says about himself. He's very careful for the timing of the cross and the timing of his resurrection. But here, Jesus is as forward as he can be. I am he. I am the one. This blind man was there. And he said in verse 38, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. He had known only darkness. His whole life he had learned to live and be comfortable and adjusted to the idea that there was never be anything more for him. From a distance, from the outside of the festival, each night he would hear the people passing by. He would hear rumors of the teachings of Jesus. He would hear about the beauty of the lighted torches that were lit up for the whole city to see, and the people singing and dancing, something he could not participate in. He could never understand. Then he would hear the disciples who would discuss the scandal of his sin. In his own presence, discussing, well, where did his sin come from? Where did his blindness come from? Then he would hear Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. And he would feel the touch of Jesus and the mud being placed on his eyes, and he would hear the commands of Jesus, go to the pool that's called Sent. I'm sending you there. And as he goes and he washes, receives his sight. And then his testimony will increase and get bolder and bolder. He's Jesus. I don't know who he is. He's definitely a prophet. He's definitely sent by God. And yes, if you'll show him to me, I'm willing to follow and serve him. He's on a journey of faith, and he comes to the climax of that journey when Jesus approaches him personally and says, I am him. And in the final confession, he says, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped. And worshiped, most scholars think here, is not the general term for singing songs of praise, but it is meant to be taken in its literal and oldest sense. He bowed down, prostrating himself before the Lord, and kissed his feet. What a response of faith. Number 4, Jesus is the light who exposes the direction and the journeys of our heart. He exposes our disposition. Verse 39, Jesus said, he finished the teaching because some of the Pharisees are listening. He said, for judgment I've come into this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. So that the blind are those who know that they're poor of spirit, that they're poor of heart and soul, that they're hungry and thirsty, so that those who are blind will receive and see. But that those who are self-righteous, those who think they know, they will become blind. And some of the Pharisees who were there heard him say this and asked, what, are we blind too? And Jesus said, if you were blind, humble of heart, and dependent on me, you would not be guilty of sin. But because you claim you can see, your guilt remains. I want you to stand with me.
Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, share it with a friend and subscribe to our channel. We go live every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also support us by clicking the Give button. This allows us to continue to impact our community as well as help missions across the globe with the love of Jesus Christ. Thanks again for watching.